state is a fiercely competitive and ruthless society. Misery and triumph.
And now, After Hours with Rixx Javix.
Welcome to After Hours with Rixx Javix. I'm your host, Rixx Javix, coming to you from the darkest reaches of low-security space, live from the Stay Frosty Lounge. Grab a cold drink, light a cigar, and let's talk. All right, say something so I can get the level. Make sure the levels are cool.
Hi, hello.
Perfect. All right, good deal. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself for those who might not know who you are.
I am CCP Pointy Bits. I am a concept artist on the EVE Online art team. So I design how all the spaceships look, basically.
Yeah, yay. So why Pointy Bits? How'd that come about?
I spent many weeks when I first started racking over what I wanted my name to be.
Right.
And my friend at the time who recruited me onto the team was CCP Maximum Cats.
Yep.
And amongst the art team, we have a great bunch of names. For example, Maximum Cats, Blue Screen, Bunny Virus. So I kind of wanted something fitting, and I knew as soon as I posted anything, like any work, the first comment would probably be something about the pointiness.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So it kind of preempted that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll share a funny story with you. You probably won't believe this, but years ago, when I first, this was probably, well, I've been playing, so it's about 6 years ago. About 6 years ago or so. When I got into a Hawk, it was the first assault frigate that I flew. And one of the things about the Hawk is the two, I don't know what you call them, things under the wings, and they spin, right?
Yeah.
And it sort of became a running joke with me and some of the mates in the corporation I was in at the time about the spinny bits. And I really liked ships that had spinny bits on them, and that for a while there, that's what my name was going to be if I ever worked for CCP. It was going to be Spinny Bits. So that's kind of cool when your name popped up. Well, how long ago was that now? Has it even been a year yet, or?
Yeah, it was a year last week.
Wow.
Or the week before.
Wow!
Yeah.
Congratulations! Wow, that time went by fast.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So when your name popped up, that was an immediate. That's a LOL for me because that's kind of funny. So we share a lot of that in common. I think at least our love for spaceships. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was curious. For a lot of people who listen to this show probably don't know a lot about the inner workings of things that are going on at CCP. And you just had a nice and I mean I'm sure there was a lot of other people involved, of course, too. But you're the one that's on the show, so you're on the hot seat now. But a lot of new ships came out in the most recent release. The Mollusk and the Slasher and the Claw and a lot of those, and they're all great. Don't get me wrong, but take us through a little bit about how the process works internally. For how does it get decided? Which ships are going to be dealt with, and then how does that happen? How does that start to happen?
It kind of varies on a ship by ship basis. In the past, I don't think there's been a lot of process behind how we select things.
Right.
It's very much the art director will look through ships and select ones that visually need an upgrade and technically need an upgrade, because obviously EVE is a very old game and certain models like the Executioner have been in since basically the start and never been updated.
Right.
So there's a lot of technical debt in constantly keeping them up to date. They don't have things like warp animations, which you want everything to support. Weapon hardpoint placement can be a bit weird on some of the older ships. So we generally look at things like that when we come to redesign stuff. We also look at ship usage metrics. So this last release was obviously a bunch of the frigates. Well, it was entirely frigates and mining barges.
Which those are ancient. They haven't been touched in forever. Some of those,
Yeah.
the rookie ships.
Yeah, so basically we just wanted something. Obviously, November is going to be a very big expansion for us. We hope a lot of new players come in.
Right.
So we basically selected all of these hulls because we wanted something very pretty for new players to come in. They can sit in the good stuff. And yeah, that was the same reason we did the mining barges. A lot of people mine when they start this game.
Right.
So we wanted something very visually engaging for them to aim towards and play in.
Yeah, they're absolutely gorgeous too. By the way, the mining barges really turned out nice. I don't do any mining myself, but I look at them all the time. So quite honestly, I might know the ships in Eve better than just about anybody. But I've spent so much time with them all. The mining barges are gorgeous.
Yeah, I've been really tempted to just buy a skiff or something, go PvP in it.
Right. Yeah, I have to do that. I have done mining barge gangs before. Actually, the Procurer is really good at that, so I might have to do that. Yeah, nothing like unleashing a swarm of combat drones out of your Procurer. They can be tanked pretty heavily, so yeah, they work pretty well. Yeah, cool. So there's not a giant chart on the wall, with all the different ships and, like scheduled maintenance for each or something. It's more of there's probably some kind of meeting that gets that whole process started. It's not really a master plan.
I wouldn't say there's sort of a formal starting point where we think about what we're going to redesign.
Right.
The way redesigns work are they're kind of personal projects for each artist. They kind of work as a back burner project that we do whilst we work on commitment work as the art department. So a lot of these frigates have been worked on whilst we were delivering citadels, the new force auxiliaries, and the upcoming structures and everything else we've had to do this year.
Right.
Which is, for example, obviously the Griffin is something that's been around for about a year before I even got hired.
Right.
And that's why you're only basically just seeing that now, because these things get worked on behind bigger, slightly more important projects. And I think this is the first time we've ever kind of... Normally we would piecemeal these out, like one redesign each release or something as they're completed. But this has been the first time we have held them all back to try and release them all at once.
Right.
It's part of like almost mini expansion just from the art department.
Okay, so they often kind of get backlogged a little bit, as far as redesigns go for other things that are, at the moment more important. Because obviously the Citadels and some of that stuff was huge this year. That's big projects.
Yeah, and again, like that is one of the reasons we actually had a lot of fun doing a lot of frigates.
Right.
We have been working on absolutely colossal stuff this year: stations, structures, capital ships. It's very nice to get away from that kind of hard to imagine scale at the high end and come down to these really small ships. And,
Right. Yeah. I mean, relatively speaking, they're still the size of 747, some of them. But yeah. I often think that whoever decided that scale at the very beginning, 13 years ago, might have cause for reflection on that decision. Now, making the frigates so big, in hindsight, that might not have been the best. Maybe half that size might have been a little better, but it doesn't matter because there's no relative scale in Eve, right? So, that's something that ever causes any kind of issues when you're designing the ships, because there's no people, to compare them to. So everything kind of.
Yeah, I guess. Obviously, we have corpses. That's probably the closest you're going to get.
Right.
We actually use the corpse as a scale test. Put it next to the cockpit and just see, like, realistically, would a single corpse or something fit inside these frigates?
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
I actually made a size comparison the other day because someone on Reddit was asking why our scale didn't actually add up. And we actually meticulously try and maintain the scale of things like windows versus pods. So I mocked up a very quick scale comparison of a pod next to a Punisher, next to a Raven.
Nice.
You could see, like, we keep things like window size and certain scale reference like that you can determine from ships. Very, very uniform.
Right. Well, that's a good idea. I mean, that probably helps save a lot of work too. I mean, especially when you guys were going to citadels, these things are as big as cities.
Yeah,
that had to be kind of challenging to work in that kind of a scale for.
Yeah, I mean, all these new structures, because they're so large and because of the technical limitation of working on them, they use tiling textures and a lot of new shaders and stuff. It's very hard to design the texture and stuff like that. So
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, it has to be kind of very abstract how you design the look of them, because unlike ships, which generally have very unique textures for certain areas,
right?
This has to make the best use of a basically tiling pattern across the entire ship.
Oh, okay. So it was was it a new invention then? I mean, a way of tiling and using textures on the new structures or had you done that on something before?
Basically, all the stations and I think all the capital ships in the game use tiling textures.
Okay.
Obviously, there's a difference between the tiling textures on a Leviathan, for example, which is just lots of boxy plates, compared to what we have on Citadels.
Were you familiar with that type of thing when you started working at CCP, or was that a learning curve for you? I mean, I've seen some of those, texture patterns and things flattened out. They're insane. To wrap your head around what's going on there.
There was definitely a kind of ramping up process of getting used to how we do our textures. I spent quite a few years before I came to CCP basically modding games like Homeworld 2.
Right.
So I was familiar with how 3D processors and texturing generally worked, but every kind of engine has their own way of setting up their textures and what materials they use and workflows. Right. So there was definitely about a 6-month period while I was working on the Minakawa where I had to sort of get used to how we did textures.
The Minakawa, the nice ship too, by the way. The Force Auxiliary ships are absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yeah, I personally, I think they set a really nice high standard for what we can expect moving forward on them, because they were so intricately well designed. And
Force Auxiliaries were actually a departure from what I just mentioned earlier, where old capital ships just use tiling textures essentially, or very kind of generic plating designs for their textures across everything.
Okay.
These were the first capitals we've done where we textured them like any other ship. So everything is unique and designed as far as the texturing goes.
Okay. So that's probably a big reason why they look so sharp.
Yes.
I mean, for lack of a better word. There's just something, there's something about the newer ships that just look, more crisper or cleaner than some of the older ships. Sometimes you can tell, even, side by side, how old a ship in EVE is just from looking at it. I guess that's probably a lot of the new shaders and the new techniques that have been adapted over the years, especially since the V3 and all that, in the rust and the dirt and all those things that have been added on. I mean, it's just been incredible. Leaps and bounds, even in the last 2-3 years.
I mean, a lot of the older ships. Obviously, we've updated the textures as we've come up with new shaders, because a lot of these ships have been around since the start of the game. But
right.
Trying to update textures like that through every pass on the engine that we do doesn't necessarily result in something that looks right with the new shaders.
Okay.
Because you're updating something that was designed for a very different look and limitation to work the entirely new thing. Right.
So in a way, the new stuff makes the old stuff look even worse than it did, probably. So in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I would say so. As much as I love some of the old designs, like if you sit them side by side, you can tell things like the amount of detail and work we put into the textures and shapes in the geometry just aren't the same. For example, I love the Heron. I think it's one of the most iconic ships we have, but you can tell from the boxiness of both the textures and the geometry that something that's been around since the start.
The slasher was a good example of that, I think. A lot of people loved, and I do. I personally, I really liked the slasher model, but I had just completed a piece last week in anticipation of you guys doing it, where I took it and put it in a hangar with a Mimitar pilot, a Brooder pilot in front of it, and just to sort of capture the old look of it. But even just working at it at high res, it's obviously aged quite a bit. So there's not really a way to do much with that, right? I mean, with an old model, you kind of have to start from scratch on it.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Also, like I said, things like old legacy designs don't have warp animations. They don't have all this fancy stuff we do now.
Right.
And that's great to see when you're flying around in a ship. Seeing it like transform a tiny bit.
So is there any thought? I mean, I'm just asking out of curiosity because is there any thought, or how far do you decide? I guess it's just up to what sort of design is prevalent as far as maintaining the legacy on a look, like the slasher, for example, or the executioner, or the Maulus, for even a better example, because the new Maulus design is very much like the old one. Whereas the slasher redesign is quite a departure from the old one, and then you've got to take those through each of the tiers for all their different variations. So what kind of thought process is that? Is that just basically a design decision?
It kind of depends on the individual artists who are working on the assets, whether they sort of during the decision process of what designs we're going to do. Generally, being an artist, will be doodling away spaceships, and we might decide, this has a really strong direction going with it.
Right.
And if we see that early on, then we'll generally go in that direction for a redesign, as opposed to, say, the Maulus, where I don't quite know his CCP name. But the artists who worked on it basically felt comfortable with the design already. And I think that's reasonable. Like, the Maulus isn't a badly designed ship.
It's quite unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, that redesign was just taking what's already there in terms of the shapes and just fleshing them out and giving purpose. Things like making the weird circly bit just behind the cockpit,
right.
Mini Dominic's warp engine type thing.
Yeah.
And adding a bit more detail to the thruster pad things that it has going on.
I think it's gorgeous. I endorse all of the new designs. Not that it matters that I endorse them, but as a spaceship art fan, they're absolutely perfect. I think they're gorgeous, and unlike some, I do love the new slasher. I think it's a great upgrade. One question that someone asked me last week, and I think it's an interesting thought too, is has there ever been any consideration to, we've got multiple tiers, to changing that design over, as an example, say the slasher is this, and as it goes up the tier, I know it changes. There's modifications to the front end and some of the configurations, but to breaking that, say in the claw, for example, would be completely different.
It's something we've talked about, and it's something these new frigates kind of support. I mean, I guess it depends on if you're asking for a radically different hull or something that's still based on the hull that just has different geometry. The frigates generally didn't get that much of a geometry change between their Tech 2s. For example, the Executioner and the Slasher, their interceptor variants are very close.
Yes.
They are slightly different, and it's really hard to see where, but they're very close, and that's based on the tech limitation we had. They all have to conform to a certain shape and like the same UV dimensions, basically, which limits how crazy we can go with Tech 2s. We would love to be able to do something super, super different.
Okay, there's a technical limitation to it then.
Yeah, especially because with these we tried something new where we're trying to support future editions of extra geometry without like painting ourselves into a corner with the way we've set these up. One reason, for example, after the Dominic's redesign, you didn't see a Tech 2 you didn't see a Sin redesign as well. Like, Sin is just the reskinned Dominic's instead of having any unique geo.
Right.
We've started planning to have this unique geo from the start. We didn't used to. That used to be something that kind of got tossed on top once the Tech 1 was basically built.
Right.
And now it's something we go into it, like, from the initial design phase, we try and think about having Tech 2, having geometry differences, etc.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, that's encouraging to hear. I like that. I mean, the sound of that, at least, it's giving some thought to how that's going to exist, So that's good to hear. So from your perspective, I mean, from you, how do you start? I mean, as far as, what kind of tools are you using to do your work? Like, do you just bring out a sketch pad and do you do a lot of hand drawing, or is it all, you pretty much like going straight to digital, or how is it?
I'm pretty much entirely digital. I do sketch, but not like when I'm doing any professional work. I'll do all of that in Photoshop. Okay. So generally, I will sketch a bunch of very rough, about 3/4 views of ships. Like, I will do a black silhouette until I find a silhouette that I think is strong. Then I will generally grey that out, lower the opacity on it, and doodle over it with a few lines to bring out some unique shapes.
Right.
And then once I and the art director are happy with it at that stage, I will go into a 3D package. So personally, I use Modo. The other artists used Maya.
Okay. Right.
And from there, we will basically generate a boxy kind of block out. A lot of it isn't usable geometry. It's very messy, so it can't go into the game when we deliver it.
Right, right.
But it informs the 3D artist who will make the game-ready model of the proportions and everything, and details.
Okay.
Previously, old artists would do orthographics and just pure 2D work, no 3D work.
Right.
And that's actually why a lot of older Eve ships have some weirdness to them. For example, the basilisk, I think, or the Osprey.
The Osprey.
A lot of that weirdness towards the engines is basically because the 3D artist couldn't interpret
what he wanted, the drawings.
Yeah, it wasn't delivered as an orthographic. It was a perspective shot with no graphics. The 3D artist actually kind of didn't read the perspective from the concept.
Right.
It's being told to me.
Okay.
And that ended up with the weird kind of shrunk, pulled together engine.
Right. Yeah, definitely the basilisk then, because that defines that ship completely. So it kind of stuck with that now, because you can't really get rid of that. You'll destroy the ship, right? So
it's weird how this sort of weirdness from a lot of this early Eve art has
kind of become
it's become iconic.
It's become iconic, right?
This weirdness to ships is something that defines Eve's art compared to a lot of games now.
That's funny. It's the old school conceptual design illustration kind of thing. We see a lot of that in the Art of New Eden book, for example. The old, the original. Here's whoever sketched this out. And I hadn't thought about that before, but somebody's got to take that drawing and then interpret that into a 3D shape. So that's got to have its challenges, I would think. So today you're delivering the 3D version of that to the 3D artist. So that solves a lot of those problems, I would think.
Yeah, essentially we deliver it depends on the artist how into detail they go. This varies from concept artist to concept artist.
Right.
I usually deliver very boxy, very basic things and let the 3D artists have a lot of interpretation, and others are lots.
Well, I'm sure you don't just drop it off on his desk and walk away. I mean, you guys have
No.
a collaboration going, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, essentially, when you're working on anything together, you'll have a concept artist who will buddy up with a 3D artist.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and then after that is a collaborative kind of process where he'll do something, he'll pass it back to you, you'll look at it, you'll change certain bits, you'll do paint overs, or ask him to change certain things. So it's kind of an iterative process. Once you hand over a concept, it isn't just this is the concept or this is the ship.
Right.
It's from there. It's kind of both of you put yourselves into that ship, basically.
Right, and I'm sure the creative directors and stuff all have their moment where they stick their nose into things and express their opinions too.
Yeah, like any other studio, obviously we have art director and a lot of artists. Everyone kind of gets their input. They can say their ideas. Particularly, the art director will want certain things.
Has there ever been a time where you've seen something that someone else has done and that's affected what you're working on? I'm sure it happens. You guys probably it happens to you a lot, I would think, in an environment like that. Right? I never thought of that before. That's pretty cool.
Particularly with the Bantam we just released, a lot of that was actually influenced by the mining barges, which another artist was working on kind of at the same time.
Right.
Obviously, the Bantam used to be a mining ship back before Terracide.
Right. Yep.
And I have fond memories of warming up trial accounts and going out and mining in the Bantam.
That was my first ship too. Mining in an asteroid belt in the Bantam. Yeah.
So I kind of wanted some of that original kind of utility, bulky charm rather than the sleek treatment we've been given to Caldari. So yeah, I saw the mining barge redesign and I tried to use a lot of that kind of utilitarian language into the Bantam, and I think you can see that in the end result.
No, absolutely. I'm looking at it right now, and sadly we're on audio, so I don't have visual AV here, but I'm looking at it right now, and it not only does it still look like a Bantam, but it definitely captures that sort of. And personally, I like the idea that some of the lower tier ships, the rookie ships in particular, which hopefully the rest of them will get dealt with as well, but they have that sort of, I don't know, it's very prototypey kind of thing. Where you can see the design inspiration for the other ships that go in that line, but they're not necessarily, they're not, the Bantam's not better than the other Caldari ships. It's a little bit more rudimentary, exactly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's nice. And I think a lot more of that kind of thing is getting its way into Eve, where I think a little bit, and I don't mean to downplay some of the work that was done in the old days, but I think more of that now is getting its way into Eve than was previously. And I guess that's probably the nicest way to say it. So that's kudos to the art department and the work that you guys have been doing. And even before you got there, for the last probably 3 years or so, each of the families is basically has a really nice design direction. And I think it's good to see that we're taking some of that inspiration and moving it into, the work that you guys have been doing. It's really awesome. And I'm tired of blowing smoke up your ass, so I'm going to stop. You're doing a great job. I'm very, very happy. As a designer myself and an illustrator, I think the game looks better now than it ever has before, so that's kudos to everybody there. You guys aren't taking frills off of Vagabonds anymore, so that's good too. So we'll just leave that for now. So
we try and listen to community feedback a lot. We would love to tease this stuff much, much earlier, but
right.
The realities of development mean that can't really happen.
Right.
We showed off a lot of these redesigns at FanFest, and I was absolutely surprised more people didn't pick up on them.
No, yeah, I saw
till now, basically.
Right. No, I knew about most of them because most of them were during the art presentation. Correct? I think you guys did most of that. Yeah. So, believe me, there are those of us out there paying attention. So, but you guys used to present a lot. Release sneak peeks of the concept designs and things a lot more than you do now. But also now more things are coming out faster. So, 6 and 1/2 dozen the other, right? We don't have to wait so long for the updates, and there's more updates, but we don't get as much tease. So I guess, it all sort of works out to the best.
That's also slightly related to how I mentioned we do a lot less 2D now. We generally deliver a very rough 3D block out.
Right.
I think the last time we teased ships, when we showed the Thrasher redesign, which
Right.
wasn't very popular, you
Right.
noticed we also showed the Stiletto and the Cheetah, and we
Okay.
just showed grey box models. Those were basically the concept models.
Right.
Most of the other artists now don't do much paint over work of their ships, or
Okay.
something we would want to release, basically.
Right. There's not a lot. There's not as much beauty shot work at the beginning. Is that
No,
really?
a lot
Yeah.
more of it now is focused on actually producing good stuff slightly quicker, rather than developing something we can tease that looks really nice the way
Right.
some of the older concept art and designs were done.
Right. So if you release some of the blocky work stuff, there might be a little confusion about what exactly that was and what it represented amongst the general population.
Yeah, particularly for example, the Bantam's block out was very, very abstract. If we'd ever shown you that.
Yeah, and again, that was a really nice way of me saying the community can overreact from time to time, but yeah. So, do you have a like a dream ship that you'd like to get your hands on, or is there something you've been thinking about getting your teeth into for a while, or
I'm not actually sure.
yeah,
I think maybe the Merlin,
the Merlin,
because that's a very, very iconic ship.
it is,
Um,
and it's an
and
old
I
model
wouldn't-
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to change it too much, but I would
Right.
love to update that thing the same way, like the Cheetah redesign, where it's almost exactly the same ship, but now it has so many little bells and whistles going on.
Yeah, I think it's got some really great potential for warp animation too, with those with those three things sticking down out of space. There's something's always been very much like a strong man doing his thing with his arms with the Merlin. And there's something there with I don't know, cantilevered expansion or contraction or something that just seems to scream for warp animation. It's always felt that way. It's always felt that way to me. Like these things need to either go out or come in or do something. They seem like they go together at some point, like the front and those two wings. I don't know.
Yeah, I would also love for the little bridge area, like to maybe sink down during a warp animation or something.
Right. Hey, that brings up something. I was just imagining that in my mind. Is it possible? And again, this is probably a technical thing, but a lot of the warp animations, the axis of the ship remains the same, through warp. Like, it's the front is facing front when it goes into warp and something happens. Would it be possible to, for warp animation to include a pivot of that axis? So, like, say, let's just say the Merlin. Let's say the middle part and the two wings come together when it goes into warp animation, and the ship leans forward. So the what was the top of the ship becomes the front in warp. Does that make sense? So it's like a spear,
Yeah.
Almost like a spear in a way, and then when it comes out, it leans forward again. Is that
it's
because we don't really have anything like that, where the ship changes its
its overall stance or something.
right.
It's harder to pull off for sure.
Yeah,
we have certain limitations of we can't animate boosters, for example.
Right. Right.
They have to be static. That's one of the reasons why one of the earliest ships that we did with a warp animation, which was
Right.
the Crucifier redesign, you've seen the YouTube footage of all that. Like, it has the two boosters and then the little arms and the shields and stuff all contract.
Right.
We very early on had to can that because we realized we can't turn off boosters and we can't animate them.
Right.
It's the same with the Incursus, I believe. It has two little cylinder things which used to be boosters, and
Yes.
they no longer are. They're just kind of these energy canisters or something on the back.
Yeah, they're just decorative now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's something that. Anyway, I mean, I don't know. It's just something different, maybe. But we don't really have a ship that does that, so maybe there's a reason why it might not be possible.
Nah, it also, like, it has things to do with collision, basically. We have
Right.
to decide the Destiny Ball, which is kind of what the entire game understands your ship is. It's
Right.
just
It's an imaginary sphere that's kind of drawn around your ship, correct?
Yeah.
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 And that's based on the maximum distance from the center of the ship to some boundary of like the furthest geometry. So if
Right.
you're changing the entire stance of a ship, you might end up with a very weird destiny ball.
Mm-hmm.
It was something we actually wanted to do with the Force auxiliaries of during warp or during any non-triage moment. They would basically be compacted ships, which were kind of on their side.
Right.
One idea I had for the Minakawa early on was that the two swordy bits coming out the top
Right.
and the bottom, they would essentially be folded back like a switchblade.
Oh,
And the
nice.
boosters would be at the top and bottom of those.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then once it goes into triage, those fold out, and obviously now the boosters are unaligned, so that's why I can't move in triage.
Wow.
But with them ending up being such big ships, we were never able to pull that off without having even worse collision issues than currently.
Right. So if there's a drastic change between the first state and the second state, that ball is going to get the size of it's going to change so drastically that it would impact everything else that's going on with the ship, with the collision and everything else. So
It certainly
Yeah.
complicates it in terms
Right.
of design, so it's something we
Right.
try and avoid because
Right.
there's nothing worse than getting to the end, for example, with the Crucifier and finding out that, oh, these animations don't actually work.
Right.
You spent so much
Right.
time designing the ship around that and animating it, and then you realize it doesn't work.
Nothing like getting stuck in the back by math, right? It's like, that's not something that we always think about as artists. This end result of all this math. There's a lot of math going on in Eve, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a stinker. Have you heard anything? I'm going to ask. You don't have to answer, of course. Have you heard anything about Tech 3s being updated anytime soon? Or we've heard?
I don't think I'm allowed to say. Obviously, it's something we want to do. Mostly because you've probably noticed they have no skins.
No, right.
And the reason for that is Tech 3's a very special snowflake due to the modular geometry.
Right. Right.
That means that they exist outside of what we call the Space Object Factory.
Uh,
The Space Object Factory is basically our system for you have the geometry of a ship, and then you have the textures and the materials, the decals, the blinkies, all that gets
Right.
assembled on top.
Right.
The SOF is basically the in-game system for assembling that in the right order. Tech 3's because of the modular geometry don't exist within that, even though we gave them the new shaders recently.
Right.
And that means that they can't be skinned because skins rely on the SOF.
So it's like a black hole as far as that goes, and then something that definitely needs to be addressed probably moving forward. It's
Yeah,
just a question of when.
yeah, and obviously, I think more last year than this year, or the start of this year. Every few months, basically, tech crews would break, particularly like the Loki, where the front end suddenly dropped off the ship and hung
Right.
like 50
Right.
meters below it.
Right.
That's another issue that we want to address, and it's
Right,
something
yeah.
that's very specific to them.
Right. That's probably a math thing from a it's like a legacy that's been floating along because they've been in for a good 6 years now or so. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So
Africa, I guess.
that's hard to think of Tech 3s. They always seem so new, right? But but they've been around for a while now, since late after Dominion, I guess. So
Yeah, they're
yeah.
very old. They were the first things that the new art director actually worked on when he started.
Oh, okay.
So that's how old they are.
Wow, that's how old they are. Nice. He's going to be very pleased to hear you say that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Oh, they're great ships. Just they are getting a little long in the tooth, I guess.
Yeah, especially in terms of technical and legacy cost on
Right.
the art team maintaining them.
Right.
So it's
how are
definitely
you,
something we
go-
want to do. It's just something I can't really talk about.
That's fine. I understand. No, and that says enough. As long as it's on the table, I'm sure. So of course. So how are you? Did you move to Iceland? Correct.
Yeah.
Where were you before that?
I was in Manchester in the UK.
Oh, sure. Yeah. How are you finding Iceland? Is it agreeing with you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I quite like it.
Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to. I just lost my microphone. Okay, here you still hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. So, yeah, no, I can't wait to come back in April and visit again. We're hopefully going to be making it to FanFest ourselves this year for another trip. But we were there not last FanFest, but the one before that. So we're really looking forward to it. So I'm glad. Tell me a little bit about yourself then. Where did you go to school for this sort of thing, or?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, when I was a teenager, I was modding Homeworld 2 and stuff like that.
Right.
Was hugely interested in all this stuff, learned basically 3D art on my own.
Nice.
And then when it came time for university, I went to a course for doing 3D art for games. Just after my second year, I had started getting commission and freelance work to do concept art instead.
Nice.
And I realized that I really liked concept art, and I could. Well, I was already getting like paying jobs and stuff for it, so I just went all in on the concept art and dropped out of university doing the 3D.
That's a good thing, though. I'm thinking that comes in handy a lot. You know, that background in 3D.
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned, like we do a lot less pure pre-visual concept art now. We're doing like drawings. We do a lot more actual 3D.
Right.
So it's definitely been invaluable, like knowing 3D from starting with 3D.
So, what was your first full-time gig? Was it?
It's actually CCP.
Is it really? So it's been freelance all the way up to that point. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I dropped out and then I spent a year doing freelance and basically practicing concept art.
Right.
And then after that year, I got the job at CCP.
That's excellent. Well, congratulations
I was
again.
out of school for like 1 year, basically.
Well, congratulations again, by the way. And it's good to have extremely talented people working. I mean, everyone there is very talented in their own way, and we're very fortunate as a fan base to have such. I mean, really. I mean, you work there, so you know. But I know a lot of the guys as well, and everybody there is very talented, and we're very fortunate in that regard. An overwhelming supply of creativity, I think, and dedication to the game, which is, it's really become apparent, especially over the last, 4 or 5 years, even more so. And a lot of that's just technology, I think, too. The technology has improved so much. In that short of a period of time. I mean, even from just 5 or 6 years ago, the upgrades in server and what the capabilities are of pushing that kind of thing out to a mass audience has improved dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's had a lot to do with it as well, I think. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today, and I look forward to finally getting a chance to meet you in April, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to seeing you at FanFest, hopefully.
Okay, so last question, just off the cuff here: Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Very good. Good answer. Yay. We can be friends. No, it's just I always like that question because it kind of tells you a little bit about the person you're talking to. But yeah. So let's not hang up then. Let me ask you this then. So, having being so young, and who are some of your influencers? The people you looked up to. I mean, you're really sort of. I don't know. I mean, is Ralph McQuarrie and Ron Cobb and these guys, are they, Sid Mead? When I think of this kind of thing, those are the people I think of. Who are some of the people that you think of?
In particularly, a lot of Homeworld art. Like I said, I used to mod Homeworld, so I loved that art style.
Right. That makes sense.
Rob Cunningham, who was one of the concept artists on that, and now art director for Blackbird Interactive, who are making Homeworld Desert Circuit.
I know his work. He's awesome. He's amazing stuff. Yeah.
Kai Lim is another great one.
Sure. So a lot of your influences are coming right from gaming. Right?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
I I would say like the previous kind of generation of concept art speak for me rather than sort of Ralph Quarry 80s kind of artists. I love their work. I love a lot of those old school,
Right.
very colourful, pulpy kind of sci-fi novel covers and stuff.
Yeah.
But
That's
in
all
terms
we
of
had.
my own personal style and like references, I generally look at a lot of real life stuff, and I
Right.
think that's why I find myself looking more like Kyle Lim and people like that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. You know, in my day, but you know, back in the day, we didn't have games. You know, so it was
Yeah.
movies. You know, it was film. Really, the conceptual artist really worked in film. You know, there wasn't really any place else for them to be. So that's where a lot of my inspiration came from, was the guys who worked in or women too, I guess. Although, you know, I can't think of a single one from those days, but yeah, Sid Mead and Ron Cobb and Ralph McQuarrie and those guys were all, you know, in film, you know, designing
Yeah.
Alien and spaceships and things like that. So it makes sense that I mean, now there's just so much more of it, which is good for all of us. So a lot
Yeah,
more to appreciate. Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't say there's such a big divide now. I would generally say concept artists are entertainment artists, and we can kind of work on both.
yep,
I really like looking at video game ones because compared to movies, there's a layer of thought there of the way that someone has to actually interact with this and use this in a game setting.
I agree.
There's thoughts behind like readability, function, where the player sits, where they can board it, where the little guns have to be to make sure you can shoot all around it.
Right, right.
These kind
Whereas
of limitations that inform design.
in a film, it's really just really the visual. You know, that's really pretty much it. How does
Yeah,
it look?
well-
Nice? Does it look good? And it's not going to be on screen for that long. So, and a universe building too. You know, and does it make sense within the streamlines of the story that people are going to be looking at for 8 or 10 hours a day for God knows how long? Right? I mean, who?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
I
know.
mean,
that-
within a video game, the consumer is going to experience your world a lot more than in a movie,
right.
because they can physically walk around it. You're going to generally have a lot more art content, I believe, in a video game, and a lot more world building potential. So
Right.
you can really tie together things like racial design values, aesthetics across different vehicles, purposes, etc. within something.
Right.
Much more
right.
so than you would in a Hollywood movie where someone asks you to design a gunship that's going to be on screen for 30 seconds or something.
Right. I mean, the difference between a Federation ship and, say, a Klingon ship really isn't all that much. You know, it's really kind of the same ship, really. One's got some grunge, and they took out the seats, and that's about it, really. You know. Yeah. All right, man. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I hope I didn't bore you to tears, and I really appreciate it.
Oh no, I love this. This was very enjoyable. Thanks for
Excellent.
inviting
All right.
me on.
I appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah, you too, man. See
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.